guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be doing another fox spirit. Last fox spirit was the listener and today we're going to be doing the watcher. And then after that I'll need to find some time and we'll get the screamer done. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I'm doing 3 fox spirits based off of the see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil, except it's speak all evil, hear all evil, and see all evil. So just kind of a little bit of a twist on it. And today we are going to be doing the watcher. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, so the first thing that I'm going to work on to make our fox spirit is going to be the clay pieces. So I'm going to start on the clay head first. I have a bunch of different resin pieces that I want to use for this. I'm going to leave them off to the side and slowly add them as I'm working on sculpting the face. So I have a lump of tin foil for the base. It's connected to a glass container so I have something to hold on to. And I'm just going to take some strips of clay and start wrapping around my tin foil. And then once I have everything completely covered in clay, I'm going to start blending it all together, and then I'm just going to roughly shape it into the shape of the head that I want. So I'm just making a basic shape once I get everything blended together. So I'm just going to start adding clay here and there to the face. I'm going to take some away, move it around, and just get it to where I like the shape of it before we start adding all of our details to it. And then the first details that I'm going to start adding are going to be the eyes. These are going to be resin along with the other pieces that I'm going to slowly add to the face. So I'm just going to take my resin eyes and I'm going to place them on the face. Before adding anything else, I'm going to double check to make sure they're both nice and even and they're placed where one isn't higher than the other or further back than the other. And then I'm going to take some strips of clay and start building up clay under and over the eyes to make the eyelids. Now you'll probably notice that the eyes for our watcher are pretty large, and I'm doing that on purpose because the main features of our fox are going to be the eyes, which we're going to add a lot more later. So remember, the watcher is basically a sibling to my listener fox. There's going to be 3 of them. The listener was hearing all evil, this one is seeing all evil, and then eventually we're going to get to the screamer, which is going to be speak all evil. So obviously the watcher's eyes are a very important feature to it, so I did spend a little bit of extra time making sure that I like the shape of them and how they were looking. And then once I was happy with how the eyes look, I'm going to move on to adding the horns. For the horns, I cut away a little bit of the clay, that way I had a flat place to put them, and then I pressed them into the clay and started building up clay around them to make sure that they locked in. If you're interested in how I got the effects with my resin horns, basically when I was pouring them into the mold, I ended up just using plain resin at first, leaving a little bit of extra room, and then pouring pink resin into that. That made the pink resin kind of sink down into the middle, creating this kind of like hazy effect with it. So I thought they came out really cool, and I eventually want to make claws this way because it looks very similar to how clear claws look. After adding the horns, I realized the face looks a little bit empty, so I decided to dig through my extra resin pieces and I found some clear horns that I thought would work really well with it. So I just added these smaller horns right in front of the larger ones. And then after adding the horns, I decided to move on to the front of the face and work on the snout. For this, I needed to build up the shape of the lips a little bit more and the cheeks, so I started adding a little bit more clay to the face, blending it together and just adjusting the shape of it. While working on the muzzle, I also worked on adding the mouth to it and the nose. So I added a little bit more clay here and there for both of those, and I sculpted the shape of them using my tools. So I just kind of sketched out the shape of the mouth, and then I added the shape of the nostrils to the nose. Lastly, I added a little bit of texture to the nose and a little bit to the face as well. After that, I decided to move on to making the clay feet. Now, I'm going to wait and bake the clay head at the same time as I bake the clay feet, but if you wanted to bake them separately, I normally do my clay heads at 275 Fahrenheit for about 45 minutes. Now for the clay feet, I'm going to start off with 4 even amounts of clay, roughly the size that I'm going to want the feet to be when I'm done with them. They might be a little bit smaller because we're going to add more clay to it. But you'll want that, and you'll want some pieces of wire, that way we can add these to the base of them. These are going to be used to connect them to a wire frame. So I'm going to roll these out, make them nice and flat on the surface that I'm working on, and add the wires to them. And then once I have that done, I'm going to start building up clay to the front of the feet. That way we have a place to sculpt our toes. So I'm going to add a little bit there, blend it into the rest of the foot, and then use my tools to separate them into toes. While sculpting the toes, I'm also going to add some indents at the very front of them. That way we have a spot to add our claws later, which I'm going to be making later out of Instamorph. And then the last step is a little bit optional if you don't want to do it. I'm going to add some paw pads to the very bottom of the feet. The reason I say this is optional is because, again, it's kind of on the bottom and you rarely see them, so it's not a big deal if you don't add them. So I'm going to get those added real quick, and then I'm going to put my feet along with my clay head in the oven for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Now, if you're just baking your clay feet, you can probably put them in for only like 35 minutes, but I'm also doing the head, and that's going to need a little bit longer time. So while those are baking, I'm going to work on our claws real quick. Like I said, these are made out of Instamorph, which is a type of moldable plastic that you have to heat up to sculpt. So what I'm going to do is Instamorph starts off as a white color, and I'm going to add a little bit of acrylic paint to color it. So I'm wanting these to be pink, so I'm just adding a tiny bit of pink. If you add too much, it gets really bright, but if you add just a little bit, the whiteness of it will kind of lighten that color, and it'll be nice and pale. So I'm going to mix up a big batch, get the color where I like it, and then I'm going to break this up into smaller pieces. That way I can make the claws. And then while my Instamorph is still warm, I'm going to roll it into kind of a point. That way it has a claw shape. And then I'm going to kind of give it a little bit of a bend so it's not just a straight stick, it has a bit of a curve to it. I'm going to let all of those dry, and then after we get everything done painted, we'll add them to the feet. So let's get started on the painting now. Now for painting the face, I'm going to start off with a pale pink, and I'm going to start painting around the main features, mainly because I want the features to blend from a pink to a white, which is going to be our fur color. So I'm going to carefully paint around all the features with my pink. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to take some white and try and blend out from the pink to the rest of the face where it will be white. Okay guys, so at this point we're gonna start having some footage go missing because I had one of my memory cards corrupt multiple times while trying to film this project, and I'm really sorry about this, but I finally figured out everything and I got it to where that's not gonna happen again. So in the meantime, I'm just kind of working around what I'm missing. So we're going to be jumping to the clay feet. I know we didn't get to finish the clay head, but there really wasn't much more after blending the white together because we're going to be furring the face later, and I just didn't add a lot of detail to it. So the painting for the feet is pretty simple. I'm going to start off with pink just like we did with the face, and I'm going to be painting the bottoms of the feet and getting all the paw pads pink. I'm then going to let that dry, and then we're going to paint the rest of the foot that white color and blend it into the pink. Now again, most of this is going to get covered in fur, so I'm not going to bother with painting a lot of details on it. I just want to get the basic pink and white color. And then once I was done with the painting for the feet, I let everything dry. I did glue in all the claws, but again, that was footage that I lost, so you'll see those later when we add them to the body, which we're going to have a little bit of that footage missing, but not much, just kind of starting it. Now, if you want to see how I put the body together from start to finish, I'd highly recommend going into my videos and finding the listener fox spirit, because the body was basically the exact same, so putting that piece together is extremely similar to putting this piece together and should help fill the gaps of what we're missing in this tutorial. I'll try to remember to link it in the description of this video, that way it's a little bit easier to find, but if I forget to do that, just check out my recent videos, and it's not too far behind, just maybe like 5 to 10, I'm not quite sure. Anyways, this is the pattern that I'm going to use to make the body of our fox spirit. Again, it's extremely similar to the pattern that I used on the listener. I think it's actually the exact same, actually. So I'm just going to go over real quick all the different pieces that we need. We have obviously the body piece, the neck piece, we have pieces for the legs, both the inside and outside, and then we also have a pattern and pieces for the tail. Now, last time with the listener, we had a bunch of different markings, but this piece is going to be solid white, so nothing's broken up into different colors, but if you wanted to do different colors and stuff, just break up your pattern and add the colors where you want and sew everything together. Anyways, we're going to be jumping now to where I have most of the body put together. We just need to still work on the tail and the legs. So the head and the main body are put together on our wire frame. And for the tail, we're going to actually really decorate this because my idea with the watcher is similar to how a peacock has all those eyes everywhere. I figured it'd be really cool to add little feathers throughout the tail that have eyeballs on them. So I have a bunch of pieces of felt cut to the shape that I want for the feathers, and I have a bunch of resin eyes that I'm also going to be gluing onto this. So I'm not going to just paint them on, I want them to be a little bit more up and raised and look a little bit more realistic. So I decided to make them all out of resin. So I'm going to get those glued into place on my feathers, and then I'm going to take some more felt and I'm going to cut some pieces to make eyelids. So I'm going to cut some pieces and I'm going to lay them out on the top of the eyeball and the bottom of the eyeball, just trying to frame them a little bit. Once I have those glued into place, I'm going to take my 3D fabric paint. I'm going to use a white this time to match everything. I'm going to fill in all those gaps to try and make it look like it's a little bit more solid. At this point, the shape is coming together for the feathers, but I do want to add a little bit more decoration to them. So I'm going to start taking my pink paints and I'm going to start adding some decorative lines and stuff on the feathers. I don't really have anything planned for this. I'm just going to kind of lay it out and then duplicate it on all the other feathers. Except for those smaller ones, those ones are going to be done a little bit more simpler. And then once I have all of my feathers painted, I'm going to start sewing them onto the tail. So the tail is already stuffed and put together on the wire frame, and I'm just going to move the hair out of the way, figure out where I want the feathers, and sew them in place. And the hair should help cover up where they're sewn into place and any seams that I have. So I'm going to start with the smaller ones first and lay them out on the sides of the tail, and I'm going to move more upwards with the larger ones. Now the tail still felt a little bit empty after adding all of the feathers, so I decided to dig into my fabric, and I had this really cool lace fabric that matches all the colors that I'm using, and this was originally for a different project but I never used it. So I'm just going to cut some pieces of it and lay it over the tail, kind of creating a little bit more layering to it and make the tail feel a little bit more full and fluffy, because I want the tail to be a major center point to the piece because it has all the eyes that we need for the theme. And then once I had the tail finished, I moved on to shaving down the body and getting ready to add the legs to it. I always shave the sides of the body with really furry creatures because it just makes sewing on the legs a lot easier, because the fur tends to get stuck in places and kind of gets pulled into the holes with the thread, and if it's shorter, it's just a lot easier. And then for adding the legs, I'm going to start with the front legs first, and then we'll move on to the back legs. I'm going to add the fabric for the legs to the body first. I'm going to take those and I'm going to sew them around the wire that's sticking out of the body. Next, I'm going to take the clay legs and we're going to add these to the wire frame. So normally with the wire frame, I leave the wires a little longer than normal, so I'm going to adjust the length of those, and then we're going to take the wires that are sticking out of the clay legs and we're going to take a smaller gauge wire and wrap those two wires together to combine them. Then I'm going to take the fabric for the legs and I'm going to glue them around the bases of our clay feet. So I'm going to add a little bit of my fabric glue, wrap those around, hold them in place, and let them dry. And then once those are dried, we can stuff and close up the back of the legs. Once the legs are put together, I'm then going to shave down the fur and shape the legs a little bit more with the hair trimmer. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the back legs. I'm going to add the fabric to the body, I'm going to add the clay legs to the wire frame, take the fabric, glue it around the bases of them, stuff and close them up, and then of course we're going to shave those too. After finishing the legs, I realized I wanted to add a little bit more lace to the base of the tail, just to bring it up a little bit because it kind of just stopped too suddenly. So I'm going to add just a little bit there, and then I'm going to move on to finishing up the face. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some ears to the face. So these I made ahead of time. They are made out of the same fur fabric the body is made out of and a little bit of pink felt. So I'm going to glue these in place on the side of the head, and then I'm going to move on to furring the face. For furring the face, I'm going to start out by cutting pieces to cover the larger portions of the face and gluing those in place first. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use fur trimmings to cover the rest. So for this, I'm going to take my fabric glue and I'm going to paint it onto the surface where I want to add my fur trimmings. Then I'm going to take my tweezers and I'm going to start applying the fur trimmings to the face. I'm going to push it around, move it in place, and just kind of get it to where I like it, and then we're going to have to let this dry. Once it's dried, I'll brush away the excess and make sure there's no bald spots. If there is bald spots, I'll fill it in again using the same method that I did to begin with. Lastly, I'm going to add a pink bow going around the muzzle. The reason I want to do this is with the listener, I ended up using a red ribbon to go around the eyes to cover them up, and I figured I could keep with the theme and do the same thing with the other elements of these. So with this one, I'm going to have the ribbon wrapped around the mouth, and then whenever we get to the screamer, I'm going to end up having a ribbon wrapped around the ears. Okay guys, and here is our Watcher Fox Spirit. I had so much fun with this project. I decided to go a little bit more fantasy than the last Fox Spirit. Added horns, a bunch of feathers, and different things like that. And I think with the next one, I'm going to go extremely creepy because I'm going to be doing more of a black fox design and making it look really just eerie and stuff. So that one's going to be a lot of fun. We'll find out when I can start that. But anyways, I'm going to have him in my Etsy shop, and the listener is still in my Etsy shop as well. So if anyone wants to give either one of these a home, I'll leave the links down below for it. I also have links to most of the art supplies that I like to use to make my art dolls. I won't have everything linked down below because sometimes it goes out of stock, but I'll have as much as I can linked down below for you guys to check out. Now these are affiliated links, so if you buy anything through them, they do help support the channel. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe to all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!